Female CEO came on a blind date in a wheelchair. What the single dad did next left her stunned. The restaurant's glass door opened with a gentle chime, and Luke Andrews felt his pulse quicken. He had been waiting at the corner table for 10 minutes already, sipping nervously at his water, tugging at his tie as if that small adjustment could steady his heart. His daughter's words still echoed in his mind, urging him forward. "Dad, you deserve this. You deserve to smile again," Grace had insisted earlier that evening. At 16, she had grown wise far beyond her years. She practically pushed him out the door after fixing his collar, reminding him that Angela, his co-worker, believed this woman was someone special. Luke's surroundings blurred the moment she entered. Amy Monroe rolled into the restaurant in a sleek, modern wheelchair, her presence commanding and graceful. Blonde hair in a neat bun, a red dress that seemed to glow under the warm golden lights, and eyes as sharp as they were kind. Luke felt the air catch in his chest, not just because of her beauty, but because of the way she paused, scanning the room carefully, noting every obstacle with practiced calculation. It was a look he recognized all too well. The hostess hesitated, biting her lip. "We can seat you, but there's a step up to the dining area." Before Amy could answer, Luke rose and stepped closer, his voice calm but firm. "There's a ramp on the patio side. I noticed it when I came in." Amy's eyes flicked up at him in surprise, her mask of professionalism cracking just slightly. "You must be Luke." "I am," he replied with a gentle smile. "May I show you the way?" Something softened in her expression. "Lead on." At their table, Amy studied him, curiosity dancing in her gaze. "Most people either stare at me or pretend not to notice. You did neither." Luke placed his menu down and met her eyes without hesitation. "Should I have pretended not to notice?" "No," she admitted, a small laugh escaping her. "It's just unusual. Most men act like my chair is either invisible or the only thing about me." "Then maybe it's just another part of you," Luke replied softly. "Like your laugh or your eyes." Amy blinked, caught off guard. Then, slowly, she smiled, a real one that brightened her face completely. Conversation flowed easily after that. She asked about his job as a history teacher, and he teased that teenagers were tiny tornadoes of emotions, but also brutally honest, which kept him humble. She revealed she was the CEO of Monroe Technologies, a company that had been revolutionizing the tech industry. Luke almost choked on his wine when he realized who she was, but despite her achievements, what fascinated him most wasn't her success, but the way she leaned forward with genuine interest as he spoke about Grace. For 20 minutes he painted a picture of his daughter, her intelligence, her independence, her habit of leaving encouraging sticky notes on his bathroom mirror. Amy listened closely, captivated by the love in his voice. "She sounds extraordinary," Amy said at last. "She is," Luke replied, his expression bittersweet. "Life demanded too much of her, too soon. She lost her mother 4 years ago." Amy's chest tightened. "I'm so sorry." Luke gave a small nod, his voice gentle but steady. "Thank you. It was a long illness. Grace handled it with more strength than I ever could." Something unspoken passed between them then, a recognition, a quiet bond of two people who understood loss and resilience. Amy's fork paused halfway to her lips. She studied Luke for a moment, noticing the way his smile carried a shadow, the kind that only years of heartache could carve. "What was her name?" Amy asked gently. "Rachel," Luke replied. The way he spoke it, soft, careful, made Amy's chest ache. "She would have liked you. She always said you could tell who someone was by how they treated waiters, or whether they looked you in the eye. 2 things you've already passed." Amy smiled faintly. "Sounds like she was a wise woman." "She was," Luke said, his eyes distant for a moment before returning to Amy. "She was also brave. She fought for 3 years, even as her body failed her. Wheelchair, treatments, everything, but she never let it take her spirit." Amy's breath caught. "So that's why you knew about the ramp?" Luke nodded. "Among other things, I learned to see the world differently. to notice what most people overlook, not just steps and doors, but the way people react. For the first time in years, Amy felt completely seen, not as a burden, not as a symbol, but as a person. Most people don't understand that, she murmured. No, Luke agreed. And honestly, I wish I didn't have to learn it the way I did, but it changed me. The weight of that truth settled between them, heavy but not uncomfortable. Amy set her fork down and leaned back slightly. I was 28 when it happened, she began, her tone measured, almost clinical. Horseback riding accident. I'd been training for competitions since I was a kid. Olympic dreams. One misstep, one frightened horse, and my spine shattered against a stone wall. Luke didn't flinch. He didn't offer empty sympathy. He simply listened, steady and attentive. The doctors called it a complete spinal cord injury, she continued. No sensation, no movement below the waist. They said it like they were explaining a broken appliance. My life was divided in two in that moment, before and after. How long was recovery? Luke asked softly. 6 months in hospitals and rehab facilities, but the real recovery. She gave a small, almost ironic smile. That took years. Learning who I was going to be now, what kind of life I wanted. And you built an empire, Luke said quietly, admiration lacing his tone. I built Monroe Technologies from my hospital bed, started consulting on my laptop. Then I grew it into something bigger, not just because I needed the money, but because I needed to prove something. To yourself? Her lips curved. And to everyone else. The business world already doubted me as a woman. Add a wheelchair and suddenly I was either an inspiration or a liability, never just a CEO. That must be exhausting, Luke said. It is, Amy admitted. But I learned to use it. Their underestimation became my weapon. They expected weakness. I gave them strength, ruthless, if necessary. Luke chuckled. Remind me never to negotiate with you. Her grin widened. Smart man. The waiter cleared their plates, leaving behind the faint glow of candlelight. Their conversation drifted toward lighter subjects, Grace's college plans, Amy's passion for documentaries, Luke's endless classroom stories. But beneath it all, something deeper was forming, a current neither of them could ignore. Amy glanced at him across the table, her heart tightening. I almost cancelled tonight, she confessed. 3 times. Luke's brows lifted. What changed your mind? My co-worker said you had the gentlest heart she'd ever known, Amy said softly. I wanted to see what that looked like. Luke met her gaze, his voice low, steady. And what does it look like? Amy hesitated, then whispered, like this. Amy's words hung in the air, fragile yet powerful. Luke felt something stir deep within him, a sense of being truly seen for the first time in years. He leaned back in his chair, searching her eyes. I should be honest with you, he said carefully. I haven't been on a date since Rachel passed. Part of me wasn't sure I ever would again. Amy tilted her head. And what made you change your mind? Grace, he replied without hesitation. She's been pushing me for months. Tonight, she practically shoved me out the door. Said her mum would want me to be happy again. He smiled ruefully. She fixed my tie twice, just to be safe. Amy chuckled softly. Sounds like a remarkable daughter. She is, Luke said, his expression tender. But I don't know if I remember how to do this. Dating, I mean. Especially with someone like you. Someone like me? Amy arched an eyebrow. You're brilliant, strong, successful. Completely out of my league, Luke admitted, his honesty unfiltered. Amy blinked, then shook her head firmly. Luke Andrews, you are a man who cared for his wife through years of illness, who raised a daughter into someone extraordinary, who sees people for who they are instead of what they lack. Trust me, you're in exactly the right league. The intensity in her tone left Luke speechless. He reached for the check when it arrived, almost by instinct. Amy moved to stop him, but he gently caught her hand. May I? He asked. She hesitated, ready to argue, but the earnestness in his eyes stopped her. Slowly, she nodded. Thank you. As he signed the slip, Amy felt something she hadn't in years, the desire to be cared for. Not because she was incapable, but because someone wanted to. When they rose to leave, the restaurant was crowded, the entrance blocked by a group waiting for tables. Amy's shoulders tensed as she calculated her next move, weighing whether to ask people to shift aside. Before she could decide, Luke stepped forward with quiet confidence. "Excuse me, folks. Could we squeeze through?" "Thank you." His voice was warm, not apologetic, and the group parted easily. Luke's hand rested lightly on Amy's shoulder as he guided her forward, not controlling, just present. Outside, the February air cut cold against their cheeks. Amy pulled on her gloves, her mind whirling. She turned to him, her eyes shining with something unspoken. "You know what struck me most tonight?" she asked. "What?" "You never offered help unless I actually needed it. You didn't assume weakness, and you didn't ignore obstacles either. Do you have any idea how rare that is?" Luke thought of Rachel, of the 1,000 little negotiations they'd navigated together, when to step in, when to step back. "I had a good teacher," he said softly. Amy's breath caught. For the first time in years, she felt the fragile edges of her walls beginning to crack. Luke hadn't tried to impress her with grand gestures. He hadn't treated her like a symbol. He had simply seen her. As her adapted van pulled up, she turned to him. "I should tell you something," she said quietly. "My life is complicated, busy, demanding, and the chair is just one part of that. Dating me wouldn't be easy." Luke knelt without hesitation, so they were eye level. His voice was steady, almost fierce. "Easy is overrated, Amy. I'm not looking for easy. I'm looking for real." Amy's hand trembled slightly as she reached out, her fingers brushing his cheek. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to hope. 2 weeks later, Amy found herself in a place she hadn't expected to be, Luke's small but cozy apartment. The walls were filled with family photos, Grace's certificates, and shelves stacked with history books. The kitchen smelled of garlic and simmering pasta, and Luke moved confidently between stove and counter, a dish towel tossed casually over his shoulder. Amy sat at the table, her chair angled so she could watch both father and daughter. Grace was perched across from her, laptop open, eyes bright with curiosity. "So," Grace said, tapping her keyboard, "when you launched Monroe Technologies, were you worried about market volatility in emerging tech sectors?" Amy nearly spat out her water. "Did you just ask me about market volatility?" Luke chuckled, setting down a plate of pasta. "Don't mind her. Grace reads Forbes for fun. I gave up trying to keep up with her years ago." "I like to be prepared," Grace replied with teenage dignity. "It's good to know my options." Amy laughed, shaking her head. "You remind me of myself at your age, asking too many questions and refusing to settle for vague answers." Grace grinned, encouraged. "Do you have internships at your company? For students?" "Grace Elizabeth," Luke warned gently. "We talked about not ambushing guests with career questions." Amy raised a hand, smiling. "Actually, we do. We even run mentorship programs for high schoolers. If you're truly interested, Grace, send me your transcript and a short personal statement about why you want to explore tech. I'll see what I can do." Grace's jaw dropped. "Are you serious?" "Dead serious," Amy confirmed. With a squeal, Grace bolted up and hugged Amy, nearly toppling her chair. Amy hugged her back, warmth flooding her chest. Over Grace's shoulder, she caught Luke's gaze. His eyes shone with gratitude so deep it almost undid her. He mouthed 2 words. "Thank you." Later, after Grace had disappeared into her room, still buzzing with excitement, Luke and Amy sat together on his worn but comfortable couch. Their knees nearly touched, her wheelchair angled close. "She adores you," Luke said quietly. "The feeling is mutual. She's brilliant, Luke. Truly brilliant. She gets that from her mother," he said softly. "The kindness, too, probably." Amy hesitated, her voice dropping. "Can I tell you something?" "Always," Luke said. "I never wanted kids," Amy admitted. "Before my accident, I was consumed by competition. After, I buried myself in work. I thought motherhood and my life weren't compatible, but tonight—" She trailed off, unsure. "Tonight what?" Luke prompted gently. "Tonight, I caught myself wondering what it might feel like, to belong to something like this, to be part of a family." Luke reached for her hand, lacing his fingers with hers. His touch was warm, grounding. "Amy, I know it sounds crazy. We've only known each other a few weeks, but you're not just passing through my life. You feel permanent." Amy's throat tightened. She wanted to argue, to remind him of reality, but when she met his steady gaze, she couldn't. His sincerity dismantled every defense she had. "You're not what I expected, Luke Andrews," she whispered. "And you," he said softly, "are exactly what I never knew I needed." 3 months later, Amy wheeled into Luke's apartment to find Grace sitting at the kitchen table, eyes red and swollen. A stack of college rejection letters lay scattered like fallen leaves. "MIT said no," Grace whispered. "Stanford, too. I'm never going to get into a good engineering program." Amy maneuvered closer, settling beside her. "Grace, may I tell you something about rejection?" The girl sniffled and nodded. "Before I started Monroe Technologies, I pitched my business plan to 47 investors," Amy said evenly. 46 of them said no. Too young, too risky. One even told me that disabled entrepreneurs made good inspiration stories, but bad business partners. Grace's mouth fell open. "What did you do?" Amy smiled faintly. "I found investor number 47, and I built something so strong the other 46 spent years regretting their decision." She reached out, touching Grace's hand. "Rejection isn't always about your worth. Sometimes it's about their vision, or their lack of it." "But what if I'm just not good enough?" Grace whispered. Amy leaned forward, her voice steady. "Grace, you are one of the brightest people I've ever met. Believe me, I spend my days surrounded by brilliant minds. You belong in those circles. But whether you end up at MIT or a state school, your path isn't defined by the name on the acceptance letter. It's defined by what you do with your opportunities." Luke appeared in the doorway, having heard enough to know his heart might burst. He gave Amy a look so full of gratitude that words seemed unnecessary. Grace wiped her cheeks, a small smile returning. "Thanks, Amy." "Always, sweetheart," Amy replied warmly. That night, after Grace had gone to bed with a pile of coding books Amy had brought, Luke and Amy sat together in the small garden behind his building. Spring air carried the faint scent of lilacs. "You were amazing with her tonight," Luke said quietly. "She'll be fine." "Better than fine," Amy replied. "She's going to change the world." Luke turned to her, his eyes shining. "Do you remember what I said about gravity?" Amy tilted her head. "That some people change your entire orbit." "Yes." He took a slow breath. "These past months with you and Grace, it's the happiest I've been since before Rachel got sick. Maybe the happiest I've ever been." Amy froze, her heart thudding. "I love you, Amy," Luke said simply. "I love your sharp mind, your terrible coffee order, the way you challenge me, the way you see Grace. I love that you make me want to be a better man." Tears pricked Amy's eyes. "I love you too," she whispered. "So much it terrifies me." "Why?" "Because I built walls to protect myself from this, from someone who could break me if they left." Luke cupped her hands in his. "Amy, look at me." She did. All she saw was unwavering devotion. "I'm not going anywhere, not because of obstacles or work or fear. You're stuck with me." Her lips trembled. "Promise?" "I promise," Luke said. Then he shifted, dropping to one knee beside her chair. He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket, opening it with trembling fingers. Amy gasped. "Marry me, Amy Monroe," Luke said, his voice steady, but his eyes shining. "Marry me and let's build something beautiful together, something real." For a moment, Amy could only stare at the simple diamond ring catching the garden light. Then tears spilled freely as she whispered, "Yes. Absolutely yes." 6 months later, Luke and Amy stood in the very restaurant where it had all begun. The tables had been rearranged for a small ceremony, the air alive with music and the scent of roses. Grace, radiant in a pale blue dress, stood proudly as maid of honor, clutching tissues she would desperately need. Amy's parents had flown in from Boston, eyes wide with joy as they watched their daughter glow in her wedding dress. Luke wore a simple suit, his tie once again straightened by Grace. This time, however, there was no nervousness, only certainty. When it was time for vows, Luke took a deep breath. "Amy, I thought my story had already been written. I thought love had ended for me. But you showed me that second chances are real, that courage and gentleness can live side by side. You've changed not only my life, but Grace's too. I promise to love you honestly, fully, and every day we're given." Amy's eyes brimmed with tears as she spoke her own. "Luke, I built walls after my accident. I thought no one would ever see me for more than a chair, or a headline, or a challenge. But you saw all of me, my strength, my flaws, my humanity. You've given me something I didn't think I'd ever want, a family. I promise to choose you again and again for as long as I live." There wasn't a dry eye in the room, but the moment that everyone would remember came after the vows. Instead of leaning down for the traditional kiss, Luke knelt gently in front of Amy's chair, cupping her face with both hands. He kissed her with a tenderness so profound that even the photographer nearly forgot to take the picture. At the reception, Grace raised her champagne glass, her voice quivering but strong. "Amy, thank you for showing my dad that his heart was big enough for more love. And Dad, thank you for showing Amy that she deserved to be loved exactly as she is. You two are proof that the best love stories aren't about perfect people, but about real people who choose each other every day." The room erupted in applause, but Amy's heart focused only on Luke's eyes, steady, full of love, full of gravity. Later, as the music played, Luke spun Amy's chair gently across the dance floor, their movements perfectly in sync. Grace watched from across the room, beaming. "What are you thinking about?" Luke asked softly, leaning close. Amy smiled, her eyes shining. "Gravity. How sometimes falling leads you exactly where you're meant to be." Luke kissed her hand. "Here's to gravity, then, and to second chances." That night, as they prepared to leave for their honeymoon, Grace hugged them tightly. Her voice wavered with emotion as she whispered to Luke, "Mom would have loved her." Luke glanced at Amy, radiant in her gown, and whispered back, "I know. I think she sent her to us." Amy heard the words, and her heart swelled with a mixture of love, grief, and gratitude. She had not replaced Rachel. She had joined Luke's life in a way that honored the past while building a new future. As they drove away, the city lights sparkling around them, Amy rested her head against Luke's shoulder and thought, "Love isn't about ease or perfection or the absence of pain. It's about showing up, seeing clearly, and choosing each other, again and again." And in that moment, she knew she had landed exactly where she was always meant to be. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button for more emotional, dramatic, and unexpected tales. And let us know in the comments where in the world are you watching from. We love hearing from all of you. Until next time, stay kind, stay curious, and keep watching. Yes.